Welcome to the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Jason Elkins, and in addition to being your host, I'm also a former U.S. Army paratrooper, third-generation commercial hot air balloon pilot, paramotor pilot, ex-Montana fly fishing guide, advanced open water scuba diver, and a full-time nomad that's visited more than 30 countries on 6 continents. As a seasoned adventure travel expert with a passion for creating and sharing meaningful experiences, I'm on a quest to impact the lives of adventure travelers, tour operators they rely on, and the communities that host them. Every week, I bring you exclusive interviews with fascinating adventure tourism experts who have agreed to share their personal stories, favorite destinations, and some invaluable travel insights they've picked up along the way. We'll enjoy a casual conversation, create some connections, and likely share some laughs. It's my hope that by the end of each episode, this big world will feel just a bit smaller. Let's get started, shall we?
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. Today, we've got Simon Locke. He's the co-owner of Colombia57, Tour, Travel, and Logistics. Simon, welcome to the show. Happy to have you here.
Thank you very much, Jason. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Yeah, this is pretty cool for me. As a lot of our listeners know, I've got a lot of connections with Colombia, having spent most of the last 3 years in and around Colombia. And obviously, based on the business name, and anybody that looked at the show notes before they click through to listen to this knows you've got a connection with Colombia as well. So this will be a real treat having a conversation with you.
Indeed, yes. So spent quite a few years over here. So
yes, you have. And just for our listeners' benefit, where are you right now?
I'm actually in the UK now. I'm in the southern coast, so down in Hampshire, in England. And I've been here for 3 years, really. Just after the pandemic, I moved back from Colombia after living in Colombia for about 15 years. 15
years. We're going to go back before you came to Colombia, because I think our listeners, I don't know what our listeners want to hear, but I know what I want to hear. I want to hear your story. So I don't know how far back we need to go to explain why somebody from the UK would end up in Colombia in the first place, but let's go back. What's the earliest memory you have, Simon, of anything that might be relevant?
The earliest, okay. There's lots of things I've forgotten, but maybe we shouldn't go into that. I was born on a farm here in Hampshire, so I'm a farmer's son and a country boy through and through. And I grew up, on the farm, and quite an idyllic lifestyle, really, fishing and helping my dad on the farm. And I was always sort of less interested in maybe sort of the going forward in education, but I ended up with an apprenticeship at a place called AC Delco's in the docks, and I did that for a good 7 years, the apprenticeship, and then they took me on, which I was quite good at.
What was that all about?
So basically, I was a mechanical maintenance fitter. So in that particular factory, we used to make oil filters and air filters for cars and lorries. So you'd have thousands of filters running through, and we would maintain the big presses and the spray shops and, all of the conveyor belts that were working. So I would learn anything from welding to working on milling machines and grinding machines down to a thousandth of an inch. It was all fairly technical stuff, of which, I was quite good at. But there was something that I didn't enjoy, being cooped up in a factory, working nights as well. It wasn't particularly for me. I think generally that's because of my upbringing, being out in the fields and down by the river and the lake. That was sort of more me. And at the same time, I joined a band, a rock and roll band, which I was the singer.
Wow. Okay.
So we ended up playing in London a bit, and places like the Garage at Highbury, and it was doing quite well, but nothing to ever make us rich and famous in any way. But it was all good fun. But by then I'd left my job and become, just sort of labouring on building sites, just to sort of pursue my dream of being this kind of rock and roll star, the next Liam Gallagher or Ian Brown from the Stone Roses. And that never happened, really. But I was able to.
Which is why we're talking today, probably.
Which is why we're talking now, yeah.
Because if you're a big rock star, you probably wouldn't have time for this show.
I'm just grateful I'm still alive, really. And then, so we but because of my work on certain building sites, I learnt new trades in carpentry, and then with a very good friend of mine, we started a business on oak timber frame buildings. So we would work out in the wilds and sort of building timber frames and putting old, historic barns or pubs back up together and, with the old oak. And that was great fun. There was always a great yearning inside of me to travel. I don't know if you've heard of you must have heard of a guy called Michael Palin. He did some incredible travel shows when I was slightly younger, and it was seeing Michael Palin travel around the world that really made me sort of think about what I could do myself.
So these were television shows? Because I'll be honest, I'm always honest, I do not recognize the name.
Yeah, well, Michael Palin, he was part of Monty Python.
Okay.
So he was with John Cleese and everything, but then he went on to do, he grew up a little bit and did these fantastic travel shows. He's got some amazing books out as well.
So how old,
and I remember,
where did that period of your life fit in with the other things you already told us about? When were you watching these shows?
Anything from, sort of 22 to 27. When I was 27, that's when I finally decided to sort of leave. And it was watching one show where he was making his way down the River Amazon on one of the, big sort of boats, and it was sunset. And there was something in there where he just said, I've got to do this. I'm 27 now. I don't have a particularly stable job or life at the moment, so probably now is the good time to do it, because if I don't do it, I knew I would. I'm the type of person that would regret it for the rest of my life.
It's interesting that you said. I was going to say, it's interesting that you said I wasn't at a particularly stable point in my life, so I thought I'm going to go travel and explore and make it even less stable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, maybe it was this, some kind of sort of finding myself or something like that, but that was no intention of finding myself. I just wanted to go and do something different, and something different from digging holes and being up on top of the roof when the snow's falling, etc. So I said to my business partner then, I said to Matt, I'm going to do this. I want to do this, and I've had enough. And luckily, he sort of went, "No, that's a good idea. I'll do that with you." So we both packed up the business, sold the tools. I sold my car, and I told my mum and dad, who were just hoping that I was going to grow up at some point, I think. Told them that I was then going to go traveling, which the kind of reaction that you had really is like, well, we thought you were going to be, do something a bit more stable. But because
sometimes people, when they get to 27 at that point in their life, they're like, okay, it's time to get stable, prepare for family stuff or whatever. And I think oftentimes our parents are kind of of the same mindset. It's like, okay, early 20s, find yourself. But by the time you're starting to approach 30, you should have already found yourself. But I'm kind of like you. I'm 51. I still haven't found myself. So.
Yeah. And friends around me were starting to settle down and have children, get married or move in with their partners. And I was kind of a bit like, I certainly wasn't, oh, that's not for me. It was more like, well, why isn't this happening to me either? And maybe it's because I was a dick. I don't know. But so I kind of decided to just move away from what was happening around me. I want to sort of prove to myself that I could actually do something memorable in life. I think that was maybe one of the reasons why I went. I said to Mum and Dad, it's going to be about 8 months. I'd looked at Lonely Planet. That's before we had really, internet. So I had to look at Book Kids, the single pages. So I'd sort of spent many a day sort of circling where I wanted to go and what I wanted to see. And there was an older lady in the village where I lived, and she'd lived in Bolivia for a good 17 years, a Scottish lady. So I got chatting to her, and she was really inspirational about the whole thing and taught me a little tiny bit of Spanish, to get me through, like una cerveza, una cenicero, and, things like that. And then, so I bought my flight ticket down to Buenos Aires, and that's when the travel started, really. It's when it sort of got going.
That's very cool. Real quick, I want to touch on, because you mentioned the band, and then you just now mentioned I wanted to do something, I got to 27, things were different in my world, and I wanted to do something, like you said, the word may to be meaningful. I'm curious, do you think that your desire to do it with the band and your desire to travel, are those tied to the same kind of instinct or desire, or do you see those as two totally different directions?
No, yes, completely linked, 100%. I'm not the sort of greatest person in the world with words, etc., but I think from my side, I've always been somebody who I think I enjoy normality. I very much, I'm now happily married with a wonderful daughter and a just wonderful wife, and I really do like sitting in my comfortable trousers in the evening, watching stupid TV with my wife with a glass of wine, doing normal stuff. I love that. But it's very, very quickly gets boring. And I need to do something to give me a peak, and, there are consumable options, but you don't do that anymore, especially when you're a dad. So, I've always been like that. I've always wanted to do something a bit different. Maybe I've always wanted to be different, even though I kind of look and sound with my monotone voice quite dull. But I've always wanted to sort of be, just do different things, because I've always been that, life is quite short and I want to make the most of life. And I don't like it when I'm being held back with things. So I think,
sounds familiar, Simon. Sounds familiar. I think I can relate to what you're saying.
They are connected. They're definitely connected. And even now I say things to my wife, and I'm like, oh, I wouldn't mind giving that a go. And she's like, don't be so ridiculous. So yeah, I'm always thinking about doing things, maybe less adventurous. But
tell me a little bit about, because also before we get to what happened in Buenos Aires after that, is your parents. You'd mentioned that maybe they kind of thought you would settle down and create something a little bit more normal, but were they supportive? Were they terrified? Had they traveled before? What was that? What were those conversations like with you?
I certainly think that they were possibly hoping, but they knew that I wasn't going to, because they knew me from as a kid, and Dad is a farmer here in the UK. It's never been a very easy industry, and I've seen my father work incredibly hard for many, many years. He's since sold the farm, sold the cattle anyway. So he's always had a life of working and working very hard. And, I respect him hugely for that. And what he was able to give me and my sister with, what he was earning, it was just amazing. And, he is, I suppose there's a part of me and him or him and me, sorry, where, farmers are mechanics, they're vets, they're accountants, they can do everything. There's sometimes a very little respect for farmers, but in fact, they're far more educated than somebody that's been to university. And I'll probably get in trouble for that, but it's the truth. And they feed us. They give us the fuel that we need to live every single day. But he'd never, sorry, I'm sort of going off track a little bit on a rant, but they'd never really travelled. The first time we travelled, we went to Ibiza because my grandfather died and left a little bit of money. So my mum took us all to Ibiza. That was our first sort of trip abroad, staying at El Presidente Hotel. Never forget it. It was great.
How old were you?
I was about 7, I think.
Okay. So because I'm just curious, what do you remember from that trip as far as your parents? Because I remember I took an early trip to Europe with my grandparents, and they hadn't traveled much. And I just remember my grandmother had a really hard time comprehending why it was so hard to get ice cubes, in a drink or whatever. And I just remember them culturally I'm not sure they enjoyed it. They're gone. I can't ask them that, but I'm not sure they really enjoyed it. So I'm curious, what are your memories of that trip with your parents? And was that oh, this is amazing? Or is it okay, I can't wait till it's over, go back home? Do you remember?
No, they thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah.
They did. Okay.
I can remember being allowed to stay up very late in the hotel bar because my parents were enjoying it. And that's great. And from then on, they travelled. They travelled more and more. It was
okay.
For many of us, it was that kind of drug of travelling is amazing, isn't it? Whether it be just a 2-night break in the Cotswolds or 18 months in wherever. And so they travelled a lot, but they were very proud of me for going to do that. And it was at the point where I haven't talked about my mum yet, but it was where, when I was leaving, my dad was starting to sell the cows and stuff because he'd had enough, and he just couldn't cope anymore with working so hard and not earning as much, and he hurt his legs and stuff like that. And I said, look, I'm going to stay. I don't want to leave you whilst you're going through this process. And he was like, no, you're going. I want you to go. So very, very proud of me doing this. And the same with my mum as well. She grew up in very humble beginnings, and it was just, again, that kind of pride. You could tell that pride that I was doing something that's different and taking opportunities in life that, maybe when they were younger, they just didn't have those opportunities. Kids these days have even more opportunities, don't they, to travel? So, no, they were really supportive of me. But, there was a chip in there just sort of.
Do you remember ever feeling...
You grow up type of thing.
Well, yeah. So I was wondering, like, when you really kind of went out there and you bought your stuff, bought the ticket to Buenos Aires, and we'll get into that more, but were there points where maybe you thought, I want to go home, but I don't want to disappoint my parents? Did you ever feel like they were proud of you for doing that, so therefore maybe you did it longer, or you did things that you wouldn't otherwise have done because you didn't want to disappoint your parents?
No, because I knew that they were proud of what I was doing, which kind of fueled me massively. And also my sister as well. My sister was really supportive. I just it was lovely. And I was able to write these long emails, trying to possibly be, this travel writer writing back home. But there was a lot more swearing in my prose than most travel writers, I think. But no, they were very supportive. I think one of the only reasons that I was sort of sometimes thinking I should go home was just to support, Dad a bit. But it turned out he didn't need me, not in a bad way. Dad's again, a very industrious man, and he got on and he did very well for himself.
I get it, and I think that is a challenge because I've been traveling full time for the last few years. You traveled and lived here, and I think that is one thing that comes up is a little bit of like, I'm enjoying myself. I love the experiences and the challenges, but then sometimes for me anyway, that's balanced with, maybe I have a conversation with someone back home and something's going on and I feel bad that I can't be there. I remember one night my mom had called me and she wasn't feeling well. And I was very, very concerned, but I'm 2,000 miles away. So I had to call my ex-wife and ask my ex-wife to, hey, can you go check in on my mom? She, whatever. She ended up being fine, but it was those moments where you just feel like, wow, should I be enjoying myself here? Or why am I so selfish to want to do this? And I'm just sharing that because that's coming up. And it sounds like you maybe had a little bit of that as well, but
I certainly had that many years later when I was actually living in Colombia, which I'm sure that's something we might get onto later on. But yeah, there was certainly a yearning to get home and be at home.
So let's go back to Buenos Aires. I want to make sure we don't miss anything. We're not going to cover everything, but let's. So you bought the ticket to Buenos Aires, and and then what?
So I flew over with a friend of mine, Matt, and we flew into Buenos Aires. Completely misjudged the temperature, thinking that Latin America would be nice and warm. Not in August in Buenos Aires, it's not. But the Quilmes beer was good. So we were happy to start off with, and then we went up to Uruguay for a bit, and then back over to Argentina to get to the Iguazu Falls, and then into Paraguay. And then I started to realize a little bit that maybe my travel focus or the ideal of what I wanted to do was slightly different to Matt's. And Matt was, a bit more party and stuff like that. Brilliant, go for it, rock and roll, have a lovely time. I kind of wanted to do, again, what we've sort of discussed earlier on, something different from my life, that I'd never done before. And that was more trekking, more traveling on the back of a lorry, staying in places that, weren't necessarily in Lonely Planet. So in the end, Matt, I decided to go our different ways. We're still the best of friends, just came back from seeing the Libertines with him last week. It's great. So then I went back down through Argentina and then over to Chile and then up the Atacama Desert through into Bolivia. Spent quite a bit of time in Bolivia. There's stories to tell there, but I wanted to spend that time in Bolivia because of Brenda, the lady in the village who sort of taught me, my Spanish and given me that inspiration. So I wanted to stay in Bolivia, and then I went over to Peru, where I decided to do my Michael Palin bit, and I travelled inland in Peru to a place called Tarapoto. And then from Tarapoto, I got onto one of the tributaries to the Amazon and spent the next month traveling down the Amazon to the Brazilian coast. Many a story to tell there, not on here though. And then down through Brazil, then back up to French Guiana, Suriname, Guyana, into Venezuela. From Venezuela, I met up with Matt again there because England were playing cricket in Trinidad and Tobago, and it was only $100 to get over on the ferry from Venezuela. So we went to watch the cricket for a little bit. I say a little bit because we got our tickets to go into the stadium. It was great, amazing atmosphere. We saw 16 overs, which if you don't know much about cricket, it's not very long.
No idea what that means.
And then it
Sounds
just started
impressive,
raining.
though.
Yeah, it just started raining, and we got on with the locals. And the next thing I knew, I woke up in the morning. So it was a good day, a really good day and night was had by all. So yeah, and then with all that travels, I would phone home or send an email sort of every 3 weeks, month, and my mum would always say to me, "Please don't go to Colombia. Please don't go to Colombia." And by then, I'd heard a lot of things from other travellers saying it's very cool. Colombia's the best place. You feel really safe. So obviously, I'm going to go to Colombia. When your mum says don't go, you go, even though you're sort of old enough to realise that you should sort of behave a little bit.
Simon, I was 40. I was 48 when I came to Colombia, and my parents, both of them, asked me not to go. So I get that. But it sounds like you had visited like every other country in South America. It's about all that was left.
And Ecuador, but I had to go through Colombia to get to Ecuador, you see.
Yep. Okay.
There was that kind of natural route. So what I decided to do to try and be as parent-friendly as possible. So I flew from Caracas. By the way, I was in Caracas, but that's not a problem to my parents. Don't worry about it. Never heard anything bad about Caracas. Jesus, it's not exactly the nicest place on earth. Nothing towards Venezuelans, but it was pretty dodgy at that point. So I decided to fly from Caracas to Cartagena. Now, that was the first flight I'd taken since Brazil to French Guiana, because it was really difficult to cross there. And I hadn't taken any flights anywhere else. It was all on the back of lorries and buses and things like that. So I thought to myself, well, I'm going to fly into Cartagena. I've heard good things about Cartagena. I'll get the stamp in my passport, and we all collect stamps. But with that stamp, I can go back home to the little village, West Wellow in Hampshire, and, be a hero. And possibly they'll sort of build a statue of me in the local square. And I'll do book signings and stuff like that. So I ended up flying to Cartagena, and I thought to myself, well, 2 weeks. I've got the stamp, and then I'll just go down to Ecuador and chill out there. I ended up staying for 6 months. So why did I stay?
How long in Cartagena?
A good few weeks, just a couple of weeks. But then you'd hear people go, "Oh, have you not been to Tirona?" Or all the backpackers, "Oh, have you done Tirona?" And I hadn't done Tirona, so I kind of went to Tirona, and that was very cool. Spent a few days there in the hammocks and Santa Marta, and you get to sort of know people, and then you suddenly get to realise, hang on, the Copa de Libertadores is happening, which is like the Champions League of South America. So you then start to go, well, hang on a minute, where are the matches? I can go and see Boca Juniors play. I can go and see, other teams. And so I ended up meeting up with sort of some lads, each destination, who had similar ideas of going to see some of those matches. And one of them is a guy called Eric Sadler, who I have stayed very, very good friends with, from then on, and we've been great mates. And now he lives in Bilbao in Spain and runs a DMC over there, actually. Fantastic guy. So we met up, and, we would travel around Colombia watching some of these matches, and we actually got to the final in Manizales to watch Once Caldas and Boca Juniors, and Once Caldas won. So, it was fantastic. I travelled sort of the length and breadth of Colombia.
Very cool.
And then I had to go down. I had to get out of the country for a little bit just to renew my visa. So that's when I went to Ecuador and spent probably about 3 weeks in Ecuador.
You mentioned some of the maybe the things and the thoughts you had in mind, definitely that your parents had in mind about Colombia. How would you explain like the reality versus kind of your preconceived ideas? And things have changed a little bit since then, but I'm just curious, like what were the big surprises that were like, wow, I thought I'd only stay for a few days, get my passport stamped, but I stayed because of.
Yeah. So basically my thoughts of what Colombia was like before I even let's say I even landed in Buenos Aires was paramilitaries walking around dusty streets with M16s, and nobody walking down the street because they were too scared. That time of it. And the reality was that I arrived in this beautiful, sunny colonial city, historical city, just full of cool music, vibrant, colourful, quite loud. But I was used to that by then. I was used to Latin America. You go to Brazil, cross the line, that's loud. And so people, to the point where the police were nice. The police were nice to you and just sort of wanted to help you and chat to you and where have you come from, what you're doing, which in other countries in Latin America doesn't really happen. or didn't happen. So it was, I just felt really relaxed. I was like, wow. Maybe it was because I had this perception, and then all of a sudden that was completely different.
Well, because I'm guessing some of the other countries you visited, maybe to some extent Peru, Uruguay, you mentioned like Suriname and other places. Those are places that most people don't really have perception of at a time. Like most people I know, or most people in the US, think Uruguay. Like, I have no idea what to expect there. So I'm not going there with any fear. I'm like, now I might go there and realize, oh, wow, I don't like this place. And I don't know. I haven't been. But where Colombia, it's like the only thing I ever heard about Colombia growing up was negative stuff that kind of matches what you're talking about. The dusty streets with the military with M16s, and people don't want to leave their house because bad things are going to happen to them. So I don't know so it's almost like when you have no expectations, it's probably a totally different experience than we have these negative perceptions, right? I guess. So you just got here and it wasn't anything like it.
No, that's it. I went to a lot of countries not knowing, nothing about it. So it wasn't a problem to go. And this is the problem that we have as a company. There's so many sort of preconceived perceptions about Colombia where, it's still, I have the same job now. We're 18 years into Colombia, and I have that same job now as what I had 18 years ago. I do the same thing. I tell people the same.
So you're the one on the other end speaking with people that their parents said, whatever you do, please don't go to Colombia.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
You're on the other end saying, you know what? My parents told me that as well.
Ignore them.
And
ignore
them. Just,
exactly. Get your stamp. Go back a hero.
Well, I do believe that, a lot of people, if they just came, I've spent a lot of time here. You obviously spend a lot of time here. You run into a lot of people that say, I came for a weekend and I stayed for 3 months, or I came for a month and here 2 years later, I'm still basically here, which is my story. Obviously that's what happened to you. So almost if you were really trying to promote Colombia, you could almost say to people, look, just take a short trip, come for a few days. Don't go to, El Poblado and Medellin and go after things that you shouldn't be going after, but come and have an authentic, real experience in Colombia, and they'll probably come back and book that 2-week vacation.
Yeah, definitely. Because I always say that Colombia is kind of the big toe test for the rest of South America. It has a little bit of everything. It has a little bit of everything. And you've got your Caribbean coast, you've got Pacific coast, you've got Andean mountain ranges, you've got desert. You've got flatlands, the Los Llanos. You've got Amazon jungle. There's incredible amounts of, history, archaeological sites. When we talk about ecosystems, we've got, I think it's something like 70% of the world's paramo just in Colombia itself, which is an ecosystem that grows between 3,000, 3,700 meters above sea level. And then you've got rainforests, cloud forest, the most amount of bird species in the world. You've got a bit of everything. So even though some people might go, oh, no, I'm looking to go to Latin America for the first time. I'm thinking about going to Peru. It's like, I always say, well, why don't you go to Colombia? Because then you're checking out the entire continent, and then you can decide what you want to focus on next time.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think maybe for our listeners, that I probably should have mentioned sooner, because we were kind of going through your story, and anybody that hasn't read the show notes. When you say I'm doing what I was doing 18 years ago. So let's touch on that real quick, and then we'll go back and fill in some gaps. But so tell us kind of what's your elevator pitch or whatever for your business. What are you doing now with your business so the people listening to this can help kind of connect the dots? Yeah. Because obviously you're promoting Colombia.
Do you mean before we go back to me traveling around Asia as well?
Yes. Yeah. Just a couple minutes on what you're doing now, and then we'll go back to figure out how we got here.
Colombia57 is a destination management company. So we provide ground handling services for travel companies, the travel industry throughout the world, be it cruise lines who want to bring ships here and their passengers come on shore, and we operate their land services for them and create programs for them. High-end, mid-range FIT travel, which is kind of full inclusive tour travel. So your mum and dad that might want to travel over here, or families, but we create programs for them, tailor-made travel programs, group trips, and also corporate travel as well. So incentive programs where companies want to send their best salespeople and their partners over for a luxury sort of trip, 4 or 5 night trip that money can't buy experiences in Colombia. So that's
you're working primarily with, just for anybody that's listening that doesn't. I mean, I think you explained it really well. But for destination management company, you're working in a sense business to business. So you're working with everybody you just mentioned. You're intermediary. So if somebody wants to Colombia, they're not necessarily going to pick up the phone and speak with you. They're more likely to speak with a tour company that handles marketing, sales, some of that stuff on that end, and then you're the ones on the ground, boots on the ground.
Yeah. So let's say there's a tour operator in the States or the UK, ABC Travel. We are their office in Colombia.
So when their clients show up at the airport, you show up. We're ABC Travel. We got the sign, and we're going to take great care of you. And what may not be obvious to some people is, because your relationship with ABC Travel is so important, you're going to do a damn good job taking care of ABC Travel's clients, as opposed to just a one-off booking. When you're working directly with the consumer, you get a lot of one-off bookings. It's a different business model, but sometimes people say, well, why would I want to work through a tour operator that then has people on the ground? Why don't I just work directly with somebody that's on the ground? And there's all kinds of reasons that we probably...
Generally for insurance purposes and things like that.
What's that?
It's generally for insurance purposes and, being covered for your international flights, etc.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. So you did a great job explaining that. So now we know where you're at, what you're doing to a certain extent. So let's go back. You get to Colombia, you stay for 6 months, obviously kind of fell in love with the place. How did you get from that point to where you are now running the...
My visa ran out and I had to leave. I went back to the UK, which was lovely. And I started working on building sites again, just to earn quick money, cash in hand, and, to see what I was doing. But I'd already started to think about the next trip, what I wanted to do. I still wasn't ready. And I knew that there was something else that I needed to do somewhere, at least one other trip. And one of the co-owners of Colombia57, I'd known him for years, and he was traveling to Asia, where he was working for an overland tour company. So he was driving trucks for this overland tour company. And he said, look, I'm going to be over there for a bit, and then I'm probably going to stop, and maybe we could do some traveling around there. And I'll probably be in Kathmandu. And I thought, well, Kathmandu, that sounds cool. Right. So I bought a flight to Kathmandu, and sort of mum and dad were like, okay, enjoy.
This is not stopping. He's not going to stop.
Right. Okay. And so I went over there, and again, just incredible. I'm just one of these people that I really do get, dare I say it, if any of my friends see this, but I really do get quite emotional about just having the luxury of being able to do what I was able to do. There are so many people in this world that are unable to do that. Even people here in the UK, just unable to do that, whether it be because of financial reasons or because they just don't have that, get up and go in them, even though they'd like to. They look at the TV and they think, oh, that'd be great. Oh, no, but I'm not sure if I can do it. So if anybody is listening to this and is thinking, well, just get on and do it. Life's too short. And it was, I kind of got there and I think, oh, no, I've forgotten this, I've forgotten that. Oh, it doesn't matter. And it was just again, sort of life-changing experiences. I trekked to base camp in Mount Everest. Well, not quite to base camp. We went to a place called Kalapatar, which is a mountain about 5,500 meters above sea level, that you get the best views of Mount Everest, which I kind of wanted to, rather than go to base camp and just look up. I wanted to see Mount Everest, that was like a 12-day trekking trip. And again, I just did more trekking and more walking. And
so 12-day trek to get to the point where you can really see the mountain is what?
No, there and back.
There. Okay. Yeah. All right. So 12-day investment. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
You stay in lodges and stuff like that. Just great. You see monasteries. And then when we got back to Kathmandu, me and my mate, we had to decided that his company needed to take a truck from Kathmandu down to Mumbai. So we're like, oh, we'll do that. So we drove all the way through from Kathmandu down to Mumbai, through these little villages and, places that really it was quite obvious. Hadn't had too many travellers pass through. You sat on the floor in some kind of like little restaurant, and loads of people just watching you. It's the eating show. It was just amazing, just such an experience of things you just wouldn't dream of. As a farmer's son in this little village, I never dreamed of doing things like that. And then I sort of became proud of myself for once. Really proud of myself what I was doing. And then from there, I went over to Thailand, and then because Russell, the guy who I was traveling with, he kind of got quite sick in India, lost quite a few kilos.
I've heard that happens sometimes.
Yeah, you kind of end up leaving India with an arse like a blood orange.
I really, really want to go, but I've heard that.
Yeah, just make sure you've got a hotel room with a fridge in it, so you can put the toilet paper in there. Anyway, so we ended up going to Thailand again. Fantastic place, and then on to Vietnam and Cambodia. Cambodia, if anybody is thinking about going somewhere in that direction, Cambodia is just an incredible country. I loved it. Just beautiful people, really lovely people. And then, sorry, I'm rabbiting on a little bit. But so in Cambodia, I got an email from the family, your sister's getting married. I'm like, okay, that's good. Congratulations. And I said, I remember thinking, do you think I should go home? And I was like, yes, you need to go home. And I was in Cambodia and went to Vietnam, and I got my suit made for the wedding in Vietnam. Much to my mum's disgust. I should have bought it in John Lewis. So I got it made in Vietnam and went home for the wedding. And then again, it was that whole sort of, what am I going to do? And then it was like, Russell and I had talked about something in Colombia, and he'd never been. And I talked about the business opportunities there. There were lots of backpackers, but there weren't too many higher end travellers, etc. And the decision was made that I would go over to Colombia and start the feelers for the company and work out what we can be doing for a certain itinerary that the overland company had asked us to do. And it started from there. And we started the company, I think, on a budget of, we were on about $2,000 each. We were staying in hostels about, at that point, they would have been about £3 a night. The ones with the curtain for the toilet.
And you can't sit up in the bed.
Yeah, the morning orchestra was quite, it was very.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
There was no sort of testing 1 2. You knew it was the mic was working.
Yep.
We would be talking to this first client, saying to him, "Yeah, we're in the office at the moment," and then putting your hand up in the internet cafe for another 15 minutes. So it was all sort of a sketchy start. And then we established the company, got things sort of more legal, let's say, on the administration side. And, people from that business then went to other companies and talked about these two Brits who were in Colombia. And word of mouth was our main marketing sort of ploy, really, because we didn't have any marketing money or know-how, if I'm going to be really honest with you. I mean, I didn't know how to use Excel when we started the company. Our first laptop got nicked within 2 weeks. I think, most of the budget went on rum anyway, but it worked. Slowly and surely we made our way around Colombia, gathering.
Simon, what's coming up for me as you're describing this is going back to the conversation we had about your dad being a farmer, mechanic, accountant, just all these different jobs. It really comes business, right? And as I hear you describe this, I'm thinking, I didn't know how to use Excel when I started this. Well, maybe your dad, when he started farming, didn't know how to fix the tractor, right? Which is kind of what's cool about, or the similarity between two totally different business, farming business and tourism business, but there's a lot of similarities in business. Did that? I don't know.
100%. I've always said, I've always been around businessmen, and a businessman isn't necessarily somebody that walks around in a pinstripe suit and a bowler hat all the time. I've always been in an environment where if it's not working, you need to sort of get on your hands and knees and fix it yourself. And I was always used to that. I was 7 years old, going out and in the middle of winter and helping my dad feed the calves because he needed that extra pair of hands. Mm-hmm. So calling in any type of help that you can get, and that's the way it started. And it was that don't give up type of thing. But sometimes you just thought, Christ, what am I doing? This is ridiculous.
But especially in Colombia. I can imagine some of the challenges with
Yeah.
the beautiful, wonderful people here that, yeah.
I mean, they are wonderful people, but this is the thing, that the Colombians are wholly, really welcoming and lovely, and they actually, we got a lot of support from Pro Colombia at the very beginning. Well, they still do, not just from the very beginning, but purely for the fact that we were these sort of foreigners coming over, and we wanted to promote their country, and it was a hard sell. So any help sort of, welcome, and we did get a lot of support. It just, again, that different work ethic sometimes, and you have to kind of tune your mind to it.
Well, actually, what prompted me was because you mentioned Excel, and here we are in 2024. There's still a lot of great tour operators here in Colombia that they've got their way that they've always done it. It works for them, and sometimes it can be a bit of it, because I work with tour operators as well, and it's an interesting.
Yeah, well, that's the journey. That's the journey for us now. As a company, is, I wouldn't say we were the founders. Certainly not. There were some other DMCs who were here before, but we were certainly, let's say, the first quarter of that. Promoting the country, I would say. But now there's a lot more, and the youngsters, they know more about social media. They know about the tech, startups. And what was a startup when you were younger? Was there a startup? What was that?
Yeah.
I thought that'd be like a starter motor on an engine. But now, these startups, and they're very good at what they do. So, that's competition now. That's how you need to.
Yeah.
That's why we have younger people in our company. Less cynical as well.
It's a smart thing. So there's a lot of things we could go into there. Probably have a whole episode around just kind of the business side and that. But I also want to kind of skip forward, because you were basically, my understanding is you're basically living in Colombia, running the business, and then eventually you made the choice to move back to the UK. I think what I'm curious about there is not necessarily, well, you can discuss whatever you want, but it's like maybe the challenges of kind of letting go, probably, because I assume, for you to leave the country but still do business in the country must have been a challenge. So I'm curious kind of what that transition was.
Yes. I met Deanna, my wife, who was, kind of, I was, when I met Deanna, I was starting to think about, I really wanted to go home. And that would have been a good 9 years ago now, within sort of 8 years, that was cool. Like, Colombia was great. Because I have a third partner as well. So Brendan came into the business. That's, as you say, that's another part of that could be a different episode. But so there were, we had a team of nearly sort of 50 people in the company, and I knew that it could operate, but I knew that we started having a lot more competition, and I was working at that time with my general manager about changing the efficiency of the company and how we improve on profit, going to the business side of things rather than the whole, wonder of Colombia and tourism and stuff. It was more the business side of it and making the company profitable and efficient, but still with its very high level of service. But I was kind of starting to miss home a lot, friends, and once I'd met Deanna, I'd always said to her at the very beginning, when she finally went out for a drink after a very, very long time of me asking her, I said, look, if this does continue, I don't think I'm going to be in Colombia for the rest of my life. And she was like, no, it's okay, we'll just see how it goes. And then, several years later, the pandemic hit. And just before the pandemic, we had Alice, my daughter. So then that really changed things. It was very much a case of, if something happens to the company again, I need to look after my daughter. She's priority. And my wife and my daughter are priority. It doesn't matter about the business. It doesn't matter about, where I live. They're the most important people. So it was then that I really made a change. But going back slightly, it was kind of just I'm British and I will always be British. However much I thought I could be Latino, or Colombian, it just wasn't going to work. I didn't have that natural vibe for dancing salsa. I thought the music was okay, but I still liked indie music. In my house in Colombia, you'd walk in and there would be Tetley tea bags and Oasis playing on the radio. It wasn't pure salsa, and I learned the language. I fairly fluent in Spanish, so I wasn't, wasn't that sort of gringo abroad that just didn't want to do anything. Found it quite hard actually to make really, really good friends over in Colombia. And I think that's just because I've always been possibly a little bit guarded when with people I meet. I know I'm somebody of, if I like somebody, I really like them. If I'm not sure about them, then I just keep my distance.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of Colombians like that as well. They can be friendly, but they're definitely, for them to, if they're going to invite you into their house, there's a trust level there. And that can be difficult when you're coming from a different culture. There's not a heck of a lot of foreigners running around. So oftentimes there's that little bit of suspicion. Why are you here? Especially if you're a single guy traveling around in Colombia. So it can be challenging.
I think sort of on the suspicion side, maybe that's sort of a strong word. I just generally think I didn't fit in. I wasn't, I enjoyed it. I love it. I love Latin America and I loved Colombia and I'm, amazing. And I go back regularly, but I just didn't fit in. I'm Simon Locke from the countryside in the UK. My humor is fairly coarse and sarcastic sometimes.
And that's hard with language differences too.
Yeah,
right? Humor is a tough one.
I thought it was funny until I got to Colombia.
Yeah, me too.
The crowd were difficult there, I must admit. Especially when you start to do mother-in-law jokes. That's not a crowd pleaser in Latin America.
I found myself many times trying to explain to people that no, I really am funny back in the US.
Yeah.
They just look at me like, Jason, what are you talking about? I'm like, isn't that funny? And she's also, no, it's not just, okay.
It's not funny. You've offended me.
All right. So anyway, so you decided, okay, maybe I really care about Colombia. I love Colombia, but I'm not Colombian. So you went home.
Well, it was also, my parents were sort of getting slightly older. If they do watch this and listen to this, I don't want to offend them, but so they were getting slightly older. And I kind of wanted to,
just wanted to be close to them.
I wanted to be with them. Yeah. And for them to share my granddaughter, their granddaughter, growing up. And my wife was happy to make that change. She was possibly similar to me when, I was 27. It was like, okay, what else is out there? What else is there for me? And she came over with me. And the idea was for me to move over and push the business that had been battered from the pandemic. We went from employing 50 people down to 8 people and then start again. But, how do you start again when all 3 business partners are in Colombia? What's the best reach? Because then we'll be doing what all other DMCs are going to be doing. Let's take advantage of the fact that we've got British passports and, I want to go back. So that's what happened. I set up the office here. And I just started talking to people again. It was almost like going back to 2006 when we started. We're like, hey, we're Colombia57. But luckily, people are like, oh, yeah, we know you. What's it like now in Colombia? How are you guys? Are the hotels survived? Things like that. What are your suppliers like? What's the infrastructure? So I was able to speak, face to face with everyone. And we got that.
Do you feel like it almost gives you a sense of, there's a sense of credibility, because it's great that you have the time and the experience in Colombia. You've got partners in Colombia. But I also think that if I'm a tour operator, maybe in London, want to have a conversation with a DMC in Colombia, I probably would see the benefit of having a meeting with another Brit that's in London that you feel a connection with because similar culture, you live in the same place. I think it'd be easier for me to, if I was in London having a conversation with you about Colombia, I'd probably feel a little bit more trusting than if I was doing a Zoom call with you in Colombia. Do you find that to be the case?
100%. And also the fact that when I then introduce them to the team member with whom they're going to be working with on a certain program and a quote, they even have greater trust in that team member.
Yeah, I get it.
Because I've employed them, because, I work with them, then they trust my judgment on that person. Very much like if you go to the pub and you say, oh, by the way, this is Andy, he's a good friend of mine, you're not going to think, well, he's Dick. You're going to think, well, he's obviously a good guy because he's coming with Simon or with Jason, etc. So it's that same sort of perception. And then there's that sort of belief in what I'm saying about Colombia and where I've been. And quite often, we have to be very honest about Colombia. We have to be honest about certain hotels or certain areas. So if people are speaking to me, I don't give them a big sell and make the quick buck. It's like, no, you don't want to go there. You don't want to go here. You're talking about, if you're with your family, then have you thought about going here? So you start to get quite a very personal relationship with your clients where they trust you and they can give you a quick call. Sometimes, they call me and the conversation is 30 seconds, 1 minute, because they're busy. But it's like, I want to put this hotel in. Is this going to work just quickly? Can you tell me, is that okay for, they've got a 5 and an 8 year old? No, but try this one. Okay, I'll put that one in. Thanks very much. All right, see you. And it's literally as quick as that. Sometimes I have huge, 2-hour conversations with people about a big group trip, but they kind of absorb what I'm telling them. But I'm also then able to understand the client more. It's not just through an email, because it's the same as, reading a book. You read a book and everybody reads a book differently. And the voices of the characters are all very different. So I've got clients who come across quite sharp in emails, and my staff are like, oh my God, is she angry? I'm like, no, she's great. I was just talking about, how many bottles of wine we drank the other night. It's all about having that personal relationship and understanding of the profile of each client, which I'm able to do from here. And therefore I'm able to transmit that to our team, who then get it. That person isn't always angry. They're just to the point because they're busy. Okay. Well, I think really at the end of the day is, Colombia57, I think I've mentioned a couple of times that we're into our 18th year now. The 3 business partners have maintained a very steady ship throughout the ups and downs of business in the travel industry. We operate throughout Colombia. Like I said, we operate in cruise, the incentives and tailor-made travel. And we're always there to answer any questions and talk through personally, certain programs, or if they've got clients that need a little bit more hand holding, then we're more than happy to do that. The website, funnily enough, there's going to be a new website soon, so you might click on it and not see anything or the older version, but hey, that's going to be happening very shortly when I get time to do some content for it. That's the next. There you go. Thank you, Jason. It was an absolute pleasure, and I think there's plenty more that we can talk about. I don't want to bore everyone even further. Mother-in-law jokes. Oh yeah, I can talk about nearly getting shot in Bolivia. Yeah. There's a lot. Yeah, I could go on for hours, but I think we should next time bring a bottle of wine. Yeah. Thank you, Jason. Look after yourself. Happy Christmas.
I trust you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're enjoying the Big World Made Small podcast, please take a moment to tell the algorithm by subscribing and posting a review so that others can benefit as well. I also invite you to take a quick trip over to bigworldmadesmall.com and join our private adventure travel community to receive new episode notifications, special access to our guest experts, and perhaps even some exclusive partner offers that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I'll publish another episode soon. Until then, keep exploring. It's the best way to make a big world feel just a bit smaller.